All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Coach Hart with Baskipedia Podcast, and I have the co-authors of Coaching the System, Doug Porter and Gary Smith. Gotten to know these guys quite well over the past few months. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks for having us on here, Mark. Thank you.
Appreciate it. It's always great talking system basketball with you guys. Not going to bore you guys with the traditional. I'll ask you some of the questions you get asked all the time. But how do you guys think the system has changed and then evolved over the years since you guys wrote this book in 2011? Anything changed majorly, or has it kind of stayed pure to how your intentions were with the book? Or is a lot of people just doing hybrid off of it? What do you guys think?
Well, a lot of combinations of all of that. There are certainly hybrids off of it that we would consider hybrids. I think it evolves. The system evolved in our case, and I think in most cases, because of the way people play you in your league play. For the most part, that's how it evolved with us, and it certainly was an evolutionary process during the 6 years that we ran it. The things that it seems to me they need to deal with, and I haven't been coaching for the last 10, 12 years now, but you need to deal with more switching now. And there's more people today, I think, that are willing to try and go threes for threes with you.
Yeah.
Those two things certainly are evolutionary things that you need to deal with in the system. And that's, where it goes from here, who knows? But yeah, it's changed, and there's all different kinds of what we might consider to be, quote, the system. But whether you're really your goals are you obviously looking at a box score usually gives you a very good indication of whether or not somebody is really, by and large, run the system. You look at over 4 or 5 games and you can usually tell in terms of shot disparities, turnovers, offensive rebounds, and so forth. So to me, the evolution occurs by how people adjust to you and play you.
Yeah. The real distinction I've always felt like with the system, and this is something that will never change as long as you're trying to do what the system is trying to do, is it's all about getting more shots. And there's only so many ways you can make that happen. And you got to press full court to make it happen. And, how the opponent responds has changed over the years. Like Gary said, more threes by your opponent. But whatever you're doing, if you're running your defense so as to get more shots, you're going to have to play more players. All of those things are a result of trying to create a shot differential. And that, you can't evolve out of that. I mean, except to try to maybe increase that shot differential. And I don't know if it can be increased any more than it is right now. I think probably the top system teams have taken that about as far as you can take it. But that's probably not going to change. How exactly you run your offense, there's a lot of different ways that people have done that. Yeah. But I think that's probably the biggest evolution that I've seen.
So,
yeah, it's interesting whether you consider, just the maximum shot differential and the maximum points on the board. I remember one of the first guys that was running it with us, coach at Emory and Henry, Coach Johnson. Really, his feeling was that they got to and they were doing it. They were doing it really, really good. But I remember one of the things conversation we had, he felt that once you got into the 140s regularly, that you did not have, that was too much. The pace was too fast to have the best chance at winning. And like Doug said, that's one of the things I've really tried in my mind to figure out how you can go faster, how you can get this to go even faster and take more risks. I mean, it's pretty risk-taking now. And maybe somebody will figure some ways.
I remember one of our early Zoom calls, and Dave Jr. was on, and he wanted to do a night where we just discussed crazy things. And I'm new to the system talking to you guys. And I'm like, isn't what you guys do enough crazy? And you want to do something crazy. But Doug, you're still coaching at Bethel. This is your third program, correct?
Yeah, third program
help run the system at. 2 as a head coach and 1 as an assistant. How have you changed your defense? Are you making adjustments for that 3-for-3? Have you tweaked it at all, or are you making sure that are you just doing, that's a good 3-point shooter, we just got to pay more attention? How are you doing it?
Lauren at Olivet, who took over for me there and was my assistant for 5 years. Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about that in the CCAC, her league. She's had more teams that shoot the 3 against her and has developed some ideas about how to combat that. Mostly something we talked about 4 or 5 years ago was the idea of playing the press and then falling back into a pressure man-to-man, essentially, where try to force players to the outside. You play a lot tighter on the perimeter, get out in the passing lanes. And I think Gary has done some things like that. I know you did, Gary, before you went to the system, playing pressure man-to-man half court. And I did that too at Olivet early on. That was our base defense as well. But how that's going to translate with a different coach, I mean, Lauren's she's just a good coach. And I think she's learned how to make it work for her. But for me, I don't know, because I've never run the system without doing anything except trapping all the time. And I don't know how well I would teach it. And the big problem I have is, in effect, this is our first full year running it, because we really didn't have the depth to run it last year. And so one thing I do believe about the system is you've got to keep it pretty basic and consistent early on. And if you try to make all kinds of adjustments in anticipation of what other teams might do against you, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And I'd rather keep it pretty simple and stick to core principles this year, and then we'll worry about those adjustments going forward.
Yeah, I just spin off on that what Doug led in with, because that was one of the big discussions we had within our staff, because we'd been a pretty darn good pressure defensive half-court program and had a lot of success doing that. And so the thinking process was, let's keep at some point in time, do we want to put this in? I mean, in order to keep the pace the way we wanted to play true system ball and to get the shot disparity where you want it. I just never really saw how even a very, very, very aggressive half-court switching, total denial defense was going to create pace the way you can create it with trapping and gapping and so forth, and selling out on your press and all of that. We came close, and if to do that, I think you sacrifice pace, and I think you sacrifice shot disparity to a degree. Lauren's doing it well. I know. It's great. She has have a good basketball mind. I know. But that was an ongoing process, that thinking that we had. Can we do this? Can we do this? It was never a case of not running the system, but it was a case of trying to adjust that. And I just never came to the conclusion that it was worth giving up the pace.
And I agreed, Gary. I remember the first year we ran it, you and I had a conversation about my concerns. We got halfway through the year and we were doing okay, but not exceptional. We were only averaging about 85 points a game. I say only, we'd averaged 67 the year before. That just didn't seem like that significant an increase. And I was thinking, and being 8-8 going into the Christmas break, I thought, well, maybe we should start just doing a run and jump press. And I think we talked about that and came to the conclusion that was really a step in the wrong direction. And a couple of other system coaches had told me, you being one of them, something along the lines of, when in doubt, become more aggressive That really helped. I mean, that idea that most of your problems are not to be addressed by reverting to a conservative style. I mean, you can do that, but the thing that makes the system unique is that it is so far outside the box in terms of aggressiveness and attacking that your problems that you have with it are not going to be due to it being too aggressive. It's being that it is aggressive and you're just not playing it in an aggressive enough manner. And I looked at our videos and that was obvious. We weren't running the floor hard. We weren't pressing hard. We weren't rotating out of traps. We weren't anticipating. It wasn't a matter of the system wasn't working. It was a matter of we weren't working. We weren't aggressive and rotating and getting after people. So the idea of reverting to like a man-to-man pressure or a run and jump press, I'm so glad at that point we just made the decision to stick with the press, because it takes about half a season for kids to really learn how to anticipate. And once they did, it was just really interesting to see how quickly it all kind of fell together. And the second half of the year, well, I guess the last 10 games of the year in our conference play, we averaged at 115. So we went up 30 points a game in scoring average after our kids learned how to really run and how to make it aggressive. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches who give up on it just a little bit too soon don't realize, is that it does take time to learn those new habits.
I think when you're playing a pressured defense too, if you really are committed to pressured defense, and not necessarily talking about system trapping and gapping and all of that, but when you start backing off of that, I think you're creating more problems for yourself than if you had gone the other direction, where you're more in control, because you've already started to play a pressure defense, and where you try to be the controlling factor, where you try to dictate, and you start backing off of that much, you're allowing your opponents to tell you how you got to defend them, and that just compounds itself. That was always our feeling with the previous way we played too. So I think that transfers into a really aggressive type of defense, and this is pretty aggressive.
What's the most common question you guys get on your emails or whatever about the system?
Probably for me, it's like, can I run this with 7 kids? I get that occasionally. And those are the people I say, hey, don't do it. Even with 10, you just don't have any margin for error. You need depth. And a lot of people are concerned. Related to that is the concern, well, my bottom 5 or 6 kids aren't very good. Can we still be successful with this? Well, everybody's bottom 5 or 6 aren't very good. I mean, that's universal. That's the bell curve. So that's not necessarily an excuse. What concerns me is when those questions are being asked by people who are looking at the system as a cure-all for a team that may not be very quick or may not have much depth and maybe can't shoot, or a combination of those 3. It's not going to solve those problems. So it can really get you in a bind. And I get that kind of question related to personnel and how you use them within the system, or can you use the system with, fill in the blank, this type of players.
Gary?
Yeah, that's always a very common one, is doing it with fewer people. You get the question, how can I do it without giving up layups? It's always
probably I figured that might be the one. So
I remember that was the classic retort that Coach Arsenal talked about having fairly early on in his career with the system, talking to one of the high school coaches at a clinic. And he said, well, Coach, I think we're going to do everything just the way you do, but we're not going to give up so many layups. We're going to change our defense, not give up so many layups. We're going to score as many points and all of that. His response was, well, that's great. We'll see you in the Hall of Fame. It doesn't work that way. The short shift thing is obviously one, but
along those lines, I've told you guys this before, but it was a revelation to me when I started thinking that with regard to defense, it's amazing how good your defense can become when you quit worrying about giving up layups. And it's amazing how good your offense can become when you quit worrying about getting a great shot. And that's the sticking point with a lot of people. We're so, I won't say indoctrinated, because it's really sound basketball, but it's just not system basketball. It's not that we don't want to get good shots. We do. It's just we don't want to get them in 15 seconds. We want to get them in 7. And the same thing with defense. If you're worried about giving up a layup, that means that you're playing conservative and you're just not going to force turnovers.
Yeah, that's why when you're talking to people that are fairly new to the program and they're talking about making adjustments, you want to make adjustments that are going to, the adjustments should be adjustments that are going to increase the shot differential or increase the number of shots you're getting up in the attempts, and not go the other direction. I think that's the key. Yeah. And the adjustments that most people want to make are the opposite direction many times, and that's just not what you've gone into this for in the first place. And I think coaches need to have a picture, their ability to really conceptually understand why we're doing this and what it's about, and see it in their mind's eye takes precedence over most everything else. And then their ability to communicate that to their players, the whole overriding concept of what this is about is so different. And their ability, got to understand it themselves first, and then their ability to communicate that is fundamental to doing this. And they wouldn't be asking those kind of questions if they really understood that.
Yeah, you got an example of that. Last week we had an elite camp here at Bethel. We brought in about 15 of our kids that we're either recruiting or interested in, or who are interested in us, and 6 of our own players helped out and worked at the camp for us. And we were having a hard time getting the kids to understand how to create a shot quickly. And we had a very limited amount. It was a 4-hour camp, with a break in the middle. And we had a very hard time getting them to understand that they just needed to be more aggressive. And so you can't put in a very complicated offensive scheme in 4 hours. So all we did was, when we got to the 5-on-5 portion of the camp, I just said, hey, you got 10 seconds to shoot. And I started counting. And it was amazing how much more aggressive they became when they knew that they hit that 10-second mark and it's a turnover. They figured out ways to create a shot in 10 seconds. And I could have probably accomplished that same thing without having spent an hour to an hour and a half previous to that point in camp trying to teach them some kind of offensive structure. We worked on that, but it wasn't the structure that was allowing them to create a quick shot and a pretty good shot. It was the fact that they knew they didn't have 30 seconds or 40 seconds to do it. They had 10. And that changes your mindset. And that is the system mindset, that if there's one word that describes what you're doing on both sides of the ball in the system, it's attack. And when you learn how to attack offensively and how to attack defensively, it changes your perspective as a player. And some players don't like that. And they resist it because they're just not comfortable with that sort of mentality. But it is essential for a system team to have that. And if you don't have it, you might as well be running 2-3 zone and playing flex, because you're just not going to get much out of your players without it.
My next one for you guys is assistant coaches is such a small fraternity. It's probably less than 1% of people that actually run up the schools. So Doug, when you're running it, and Gary, when you were running it, Doug decided to do a totally different offense than what Grinnell, the originators of it, did. Did you just do it by trial and error, or did you talk amongst yourselves to get ideas? It wasn't game film, like to go watch, because you had to have the typical style where you just go, hey, I'm going to watch them play and get pointers. What was it like when things were going bad? Who'd you turn to? Did you call Coach A? I mean, there was, like I said, it's less than one. It's probably, for you guys back then, it was probably a handful, 5 guys or less. I mean, Am I right? Was it about 5 people?
Yeah, it was.
Well,
It was
I'll let Gary answer that because I got a podcast first. I got nature calls here, so you go ahead, Gary. I'll be right back.
okay. It was a great time. It really was. I look back on that first year, 2.5 years of doing it, and it was a great time because yes, we were doing it. Coach A was doing it, but it was Doug and Bunky at Berea, Bunky Harkle Road, and they're in the high school at that time. And then there was Coach Bob Johnson at Emory and Henry, and it was basically us. There wasn't anybody else. And you know, the conversations that we had and shared went on and on and on. We had Bob Belf was key at that time, and he was instrumental in allowing us. We'd set up he had set up the run and gun site, and I still have a whole big folders of that. We're moving right now, and I'm debating whether I'm going to keep all those folders or not. But I've got them of those initial conversations that we had. So we're talking and sharing back and forth, and I know that we bonded, and it was a great time. I thoroughly enjoyed the first year, 2 years, 3 years. The first year that we did it, I had talked very briefly to Coach A, and we weren't very good the first year at all. And of course, Doug wasn't doing it that year. And then I spent 2-3 days at Grinnell with Coach A, and had a much better concept of how you never stop, like Doug was talking about, never ever stop attacking. And then Doug came in and started running it, and Bunky was running it then. So that's how we did it. Lots of conversations and trading and this and that back and forth. How do you remember that differently, Doug?
Yeah, I think for me it was I got the basics from Coach A, and I read the little booklet that he put out, and then I saw his videotape that he put out. And the only hesitation I had, I totally bought into the defense. We did that from day one. There's the offensive set at the end of the break. I didn't have very good point guards. I say not very good. I had an all-conference point guard, but it was first year for her. And I think rather than blame her, I should say I didn't know how to teach Grinnell's offense. I did know how to teach a high-low passing game, which is what I'd always run. But it was a very disciplined, patient offense, the way we ran it. And we ran into a problem. We put this in the book, I think, where we played a Division II team that was really good, and they switched everything. And we couldn't get a three-point look to save our lives. And we just got destroyed. I think we were down 52-12 at halftime, no joke. And you talk about soul searching. I knew we had to do something different. And fortunately, I had kids bought in enough that they were willing to give me a chance to figure it out. And I don't know where the concept of the idea came to me, but I knew that continuing to try to run passing game wasn't going to be the answer. So we figured out how to create dribble penetration within a 4-out structure, which essentially ended up being Wahlberg's dribble drive. He runs it a little differently than we do. I didn't know anything about dribble drive. I'd never heard of it. But I did know that if you were going to drive to the basket, you better get the post player out of the way. So we did that. And we taught our kids how to do kind of a 4-player weave and evolve that way. And it was totally trial and error for me. I didn't know anybody else doing what we were trying to do. I just knew that we had to attack the basket, and we did. And it started to help a lot. But going to clinics with other system coaches and trading ideas, and the system chat group was a huge help to me. I don't know, Gary, how you felt about it, but getting on that every day and hearing from other coaches about what their issues were and how they were learning how to make it work. That was really a great community of people sharing ideas. And I got some of my core concepts from that, ideas like, when in doubt, be more aggressive. And then talking more with Gary as we developed the book was another big help. Going to clinics at Grinnell was a big help. There were a lot of people out at, Bunky's teams at Berea at the time. I remember one time he said, I called Bunky and I said, well, what about turnovers, Bunky? I mean, we're turning the ball over a lot, and maybe we're trying to be a little bit overly organized on offense or something. He said, Coach, I just tell my girls, you get it across half court and drop kick it, and as long as you hit the backboard, you get an offensive rebound. That's your offense there.
So that's the person you're referring to in the book, because I was going to ask you that. I was like, I read that in the book, and it's like the drop kick to the backboard. At least you can get an offensive rebound, right?
Yeah,
so,
that was Bunky.
You didn't say which coach it was, so I was just curious.
He was the only other one running it, basically, so I had to ask somebody. But yeah, that was early on how we developed it. It was just by getting our head kicked in a few times and realizing we had to do something different. And then, the second year was a lot smoother, and the third year it evolved, and we got good players, and we recruited to the system. And over the course of about 3 years, we got kids that really plugged in well with the roles that we needed. And that's a big part of just having the right people, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
One of the things for us is that we had run LMU like 5 or 6 years before we started running system. We'd run something in the interim, different in the interim. And, that was a very aggressive attack mentality offensively, where it was after a very minimal number of actions, it was drive and pitch. That's basically what it was. A type of dribble drive, not as spaced as Doug's and as much as that, but it was along those lines. But I would go back to one other thing that you said too, that little pamphlet, that's where it all kind of started for me. I mean, I started reading that thing like over a year before I ever made the decision. One July morning, I remember waking up and, we're going to do this. It was early July, and I woke up, yes, we're going to do it. I've been studying that book and visualizing it and thinking about it for a year. But that was the thing, and I know that's still out there someplace, and that's kind of where it all started. That's where it all started for us and for many of us, I think.
Yeah, me too, Gary, and just because there were some things he said in the book that really, it's like he was talking to me, where he said, I'm not having any fun coaching, or I wasn't having any fun coaching. Had a lot of player attrition, people not wanting to stick with the program, didn't feel like the players were developing, no fan support. I think the phrase he used was you could have shot a cannon through our gym and not hit anybody, except maybe a stray parent. And I read that and I thought, well, he's talking about my program. And then he talked about what they did about it, which was install the system and the guts it took to put that in. I was just astounded. And I thought, well, if he can do it, if he can make it work, we could make it work, because we got those same issues. It's just that we're trying to do it with female athletes, not male athletes. That was the only real reservation I had as to whether it would translate.
And now it's fair to say more women's teams run it than men's teams.
Yeah.
I mean, at least at the college level, the only pure, what we would consider pure system teams running it that I can think of at the college level is Greenville and Grinnell.
I don't know of anybody else that
I mean, Pacific runs, but it's more of a hybrided, kind of what you guys were talking about, where they press, but then they get back into a more conservative up the line pressure where they don't really trap. So those are the three that are considered, but then you got a list of, I think I've figured it out the other day, about 8 to 10 women's teams that are claiming to run it.
Yeah. So, I don't know why it is that more women's teams run it. I think it's probably something to do with you can force more turnovers against female athletes because they're not strong enough to throw certain passes, or the pass won't carry quite as far. And so
I think playing more players and subbing probably more resonates with girls than it does guys, maybe.
Maybe, but I've had the other side too, Mark. It's where girls will say, why should I give up my playing time for this kid who's not as good as me? There can be a little bit of that kind of tension, which we had last year with our program, and I think we've gotten past that. But that's definitely an issue with female athletes, can be. So, yeah.
Gary, I mean, you ran LMU, you ran your Redlands, and then you got to coach with Coach A for a year. What would you, if you came back and ran system, would you be pure to what you've done with the staggered and everything, or would you be more drive and kick, or what do you think you would do?
I think I would still be. We were a little more along with a speedier push up the floor via LMU. And I think I would still build it primarily on that. And whether the cut around the double would be as a double stagger would be as much of a fundamental part of it, I'm not sure, because even the last year at Redlands, we were running a lot more balanced floor stuff.
Yeah.
People were beginning to switch, and we were about half the time even on made baskets and balanced floor type of action, but with the same speed up the floor. So, you know, I suspect we would be going more to that, it depends on your personnel too. I mean, what kind of people you have. When we were most effective with it, with the Grinnell stuff, we were most effective with it when we had point guards who could put passes on the money, really good passers. It didn't have to be ultra fast, although it helped. But if they could put it on the money and the timing was right, then that was most effective. But with the switching, the changing back and forth, I would suspect we'd probably be a little more balanced floor oriented, but it's still a concept of get a lot more shots. That hasn't changed at all. The speed up the floor and the number of possessions, that's no different. It's no different.
Well, we had Coach A on early July. We did a roundtable. You guys probably remember, and he came on and talked about the evolution. And it kind of shocked me. He said that he doesn't know if he could run the Grinnell version anymore because the quality point guard that you need to have. And that's why Dave Jr.'s kind of made some adjustments, keeping the guy in the corner, not sending the player through, getting a little bit more drive and kick at Grinnell. They've kind of changed a little bit. They're not looking the same. So I think when I'm observing it, just want to know your opinion real quick, is it's harder to get the three-point shot now because of the way they defend. So with the switching like of the screens, and everybody's defensive philosophy nowadays is run them off the three-point line. People don't like giving up threes anymore. Before they used to. So I think that's, when we're talking evolution, I think that's what's changed the most, is it's trying to find what you need to run to get your three-point attempts. Do you guys agree with that?
You know,
I feel like if you got teams that are determined not to give you a three, then take a two. I just go at them. If they're on the arc, they can't defend the rim too. So it's you have to be willing to take what they give you, and if it's a great two-point shot, that's fine with us.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The other thing I would say relative to that is that it's not so much the structure of what you're doing offensively as it is the chaos and the brokenness of the game that you're creating defensively that's going to get you the shots that you want. The more threes. That's where they come from. And that's created, I think, more by what you do defensively and just creating chaos out there. Structure isn't going to create it for you. Teams are too good defensively.
Yeah, that's true, Gary. When you're running, I mean, I know where your question's coming from, Mark. If you were to X and O it, you'd say, well, the way they're going to run their defense is they're going to take this away. But that's assuming that you're running a half-court offense. They got to get there first, and they got to get matched up. And very often within the system, off a rebound or off a steal, which is it's about half of the shots you get. you can create in open floor situations, and it's really hard to get matched up. And if you try to, you're just leaving the rim exposed. So that's a high percentage situation. And the other thing is, name me anybody who's going to X and O a defense against a 3-point rebound or an offensive rebound kick out. How do they defend that? Now, maybe they do, but that's not something coaches typically think about, is the fact that if you get an offensive board and you train your kids to kick it back out for a 3, you've created a really high percentage shot, and your defenders are not really thinking about flying back out at that 3-point shooter again.
It's interesting how that's kind of changed in the game. I see more teams, and one of the first ones I saw at the national level starting to pay more attention to that was Duke, and rebounding and throwing the ball back out for second chance threes, not at the pace that we played by a long shot, but right at first, you didn't hear anybody else talking about second chance threes. It just wasn't done. And now you hear people, Doug Collins and so forth, and some of them talking about that and how it's a good thing. But yeah, try and defend it.
Yeah. I bet Krzyzewski got called a genius for doing that too. How innovative. And he is, but it's also, he can steal with the best of them.
When to bring that point up, there was an article came out about the 10 most creative or 5 most creative basketball coaches in the last 30 or 50 years in basketball, and they were naming some names, and Coach A was not one of the 5. And I cannot imagine anybody who has affected the game more from a creative standpoint than Coach A.
Especially with the way the game is played now and how analytical the game is with rim, layups, and threes. He was doing it 25 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
Before we knew what the word analytics were.
Yeah, and I think the reason he doesn't get as much credit for that is because the rest of the system is so outside the box that people just dismiss it and say, well, that's a gimmick. And you guys hear my cat? Yeah. Sorry, bathroom breaks and cats is a chaos around here. But because he's pressing all the time, giving up layups, running in 5 groups of kids at a time, people look at that and they say, well, this guy's got nothing legitimate to contribute to my understanding of the game. And the reality was that the 3-point shooting, the inside-out passing, which just by itself is a tremendous innovation. Creating a 3 from the lane out to a shooter as opposed to around.
So that was a little dribble drive-ish, Wahlberg-ish before Wahlberg even
Exactly. Yeah. And offensive rebounding with 4 guys, not sending your shooter to the top, or not sending your shooter to the offensive glass, but rotating them up so they can get a second chance 3. Those are innovations that are on par with anything anybody's done in the game in the last 50 years.
Pressing on a
and make a huge difference in terms of your offensive productivity. And his son proved that in the D League when he coached at Reno, and took, basically it was a 24-year-old kid coming in there and schooling them about how to run an efficient offense.
Yeah. So, Gary, you got to coach with them for a year. You had ran the system. What was it like, and how much more did you learn just in that one season? It was your last year coaching. Coaching at the collegiate level, because you came back and helped at the high school level. But what was it like coaching with him?
Yeah, it was really a neat experience. I lived in their house for that time. I had a bedroom and no bathroom in their house, and lived there and ate meals with them and the whole thing. And so I saw how he lived his life, and a lot of things stand out. One of which was the amount of time that he spent preparing shifts was incredible for each game. A different concept of whether you wanted maximum participation, maximum specialization, whatever he'd going into a different game. And literally he'd be sitting on his couch thinking up all these the whole floor would be covered with wadded up, thrown away shift charts that didn't work, that he's doing something else. That, and when he asked me to come back, he said, well, maybe you could work with the defense. And yeah, there was no, his practice plans were in his head. And they were organized, absolutely detailed. They were terrific.
So there is no proof of a 3x5 card. That Bob Belf says that he did.
Well, maybe there is. Maybe I didn't see him. But, they kept him under file or something. But I remember when after I'd left, we talked. I was driving. I drove east and drove back to see family in the east, and we were talking in the car one time, and he was saying, you confused my guys so much, Coach, when we were here with that year. I don't know if they'll ever get them straight again. And it's probably true. It's probably true. Their defensive thing is so random. Their heads are obviously clear. They don't have too much in their head. It's just fly here and fly there. And there's a beauty to that. And the simplicity on that end of the floor. And they obviously he comes into the game from an offensive end, and I come at it from the defensive end. And so it was very interesting. We had some disagreements along the way, of course. One of which I remember, we were playing at Monmouth, and we had gotten off late in the first half to a very good lead. We were up 20 or 25 and doing very well, or maybe it was, it was still first half. And I was encouraging our safety to continue to gamble, go for it. And he made a couple misjudgments and went for it. And Coach didn't like that. And I heard about it. At some point, you need to start being being more conservative defensively, at least that back end of the floor. So, but there's a lot of different things. I learned so much about frankness from him, how literally frank he was with his players. This is how it is. This is your role, and it was absolute no hedging bets or anything there. He told them how it was for each game, and everybody knew their role. And I don't think I've seen that in a coach to the degree that it was the case at Grinnell. Just his creative mind, and then of course, obviously you all know that's the story. He sits at the end of the bench, doesn't get up. He sits at the end of the bench and at the far end of the bench, and he gets up and at timeouts and so forth. But basically, he's down there the whole time. A lot of things are very different, obviously, very, very different. And hearing stories about how it all had come apart in the beginning, and how he came to embrace this in the first place, and that he got the concept of the 5-on-5. He's Canadian to start with, from a Canadian coach, and some of the experiences that he's had as an offensive player in a defensive program when he was in college, and how that influenced his approach to the game. And then, of course, all the things that happened, how difficult it was at Grinnell to start with, and so on. But it was a unique year for me, and I do, I do many times reflect and think, wow, if I'd been able to take some of that knowledge and some of those insights back to the game and have done it. But I made some other decisions with my life in terms of family and so forth, and I don't regret that. But it would have been very, very interesting to have taken those and gone back and done it for another 3 or 4 years.
Well, Gary, I need a defensive coordinator, so you still, if you could put up with an Indiana winner, you did an Iowa. That was probably hard enough.
That was plenty hard. That was a whole unique experience for me, a winter in Iowa. I can't get down a defensive stance on my knees anymore.
I was going to ask, did they know what a quiver was in Grinnell until Gary Smith arrived?
I don't think they knew what the word quiver was, but we got that in their lexicon now. Yeah, it's there.
I think the thing that I always really admired about Coach Arsenault as I got to know him, heard him speak in various situations was how literally I've never been around a coach at the college level that cared less about winning in a healthy way. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know he is trying to help his kids and his teams be successful, and he's proud of the conference championships. He's proud of how the system has been successful over the years, but it is not his first priority. And what was that he said recently about having a game where they were up? He was almost bragging to somebody. He says, yeah, we had a really exciting game the other night. We were up 30 and we ended up blowing it. And he was just in amazement about how they managed to do that, because he knew the next night they could be down 30 and win. And he was just all about, I mean, if there's anybody in America outside the St. John's football coach in the past era who has a better understanding of Division III philosophy, there's very few coaches in Division III that have a Division III philosophy, and he's one of them. He really understood. It's about giving the players a good experience, playing a lot, having maximum participation, developing your players on and off the court as good young men or women. He had all of those internalized in a way that I've never seen any other coach do, and I really learned a lot from that part of his character.
Yeah, that's a good insight comparison to the St. John. I don't remember his name, but the player of the year is named after him in Division III football now. But
Gugliani or something like that.
What was it?
It's Gugliani. I don't remember either. I've got a handout that he wrote. But
he was very unique in the things that he did, and the way he did it, the number of people that he played, and the way they visualized, and they didn't hit, during the week, and
stretching routines.
Stretching routines, and it was all so anti hard contact football, and they were so successful. And yes, those two guys. That's a good one, Doug, because those two stand out more than anybody else in terms of maximum participation and doing it a different way, and not being winning is the only thing. That phrase, winning is the only thing. It's not the only thing to either of them, and I hope it's.
Well, a lot of coaches would buy into that and say, well, we're not about winning, we're about developing people. And yet when you watch them coach, it's clear that that's not true.
Right.
They are passionate about it, and they're doing everything they can to make it happen. And with David, he gets as much kick out of setting a new record or figuring out how to break this or that standard. That means as much to him as winning the game.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. The new way to get the most guys making a three in a night or something like that. The night that I was there, the night that we created 38 assists for Dave Jr. Yeah. And it was classic. I'll tell you, it was really amazing. And that was a game preparation, to get that done, and it did. It was an amazing night.
Well, the other story too is when his kid scored, what was it, 140, 138?
138. Yep.
Yeah. And everybody around the country, I know what they're thinking. So there's Arsenault running up the score, and there's Arsenault trying to, make one kid a ball hog or something. It wasn't about that at all. It was trying to help the kid have some scoring confidence so that when they got to conference play, he would have the confidence to know that he could score on anybody. And he did. It was like a turning point in that kid's career. And he was doing it because it was fun. Because, what a kick to see if your kid can go on a roll enough in the first quarter to prove that he had a shot 3 quarters down the road of scoring over 100.
Twice.
And just to see if you could make that happen.
He did it twice.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the next one. Dave Jr. came on one of our early Zoom things, and I was still helping running these things with you guys. And he says, let's do a night where we just talk about weird things with the system that you want to try, but you've never done because you want to do some crazy things. And I'm like, Dave Jr., isn't this what you do right now? Crazy enough, 7-5 in, 5 out, shoot the ball every 7 seconds. Is there anything that other than, I know Coach A came up with goon ball and other variations. Doug, have you come up with anything that you've wanted to try? That
You stole my thunder. Goonball was it for me. I never have tried that. I never had the guts to. And the funny thing is, when I first heard about the system back in the 90s, the way it was described to me, the person who described it, who was a former Grinnell student, she said, yeah, they just send 2 guys to the other end of the floor and they play 5-on-3, and then when they get the rebound, they just throw it down, they shoot it. And I said, that's not basketball. And I had nothing to do with the system for 3 or 4 years after that, because I thought that's what it was. And so maybe that's why when I started coaching, and I've coached, 250 system games, I guess. And I've never had the guts to just send 2 kids down the floor, especially against a team that's trying to hold it, which is the reason you do it in the first place. So no, that's the one that.
Yeah, some of them that were talked about. Yeah, some of them that were talked about was shoot nothing but threes. Have a whole game where that's all you take. And then I had Coach Gunter on, that Coach Smith knows very well up in Northern California. 121 three-point attempts.
Yeah, attempts.
In a game.
Of course, he only did 7, right?
32-minute high school game.
They do get them up, I'll tell you. They do,
yeah. It's amazing. Most we ever had was like 80, 78 or 80. And I was amazed that we did that. I don't know how he gets that many up in a 32-minute game.
I don't even know how you get 121 shots up.
Yeah. Speaking of guts to do something, that's one of the vivid memories that I have of back in 1979 or 80, 81, right around in there. We got played Point Loma Nazarene. We were playing very very aggressive defense, very deliberate offense in those days. And they were a very good team, and we got way behind them down their place. And so with, 10 minutes, 12 minutes to go in the game, we just went to what we called at that time our 14 defense, which was nothing, total denial. We just denied everything, full court. We'd never done it before. We'd talked about it, but we'd never really done it in practice even. So here was the time, and so we did it. And we came all the way back in that game, wound up losing by 1, as I recall, but we came all the way back from a big, huge deficit. And I spent, I don't know how long, how many weeks or months afterward thinking, God, why don't we do that all the time? And I think we would have done it had we not been so successful. We were very successful at that time playing the way we were playing. And had we not been very successful, I probably would have had the guts to do it, but we didn't. And it took another 30 years before we finally got back to doing it. So
see, Gary, if you'd have followed through and just followed your instincts, you'd have been David Arsenault.
Yeah, I wouldn't have had all that creativity to it, but we would have been pressing like heck anyway.
So what do you guys think is the next evolution? What do you think might come of this? You think someone can score 140 in a season? Average,
you mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
Somebody will.
They're already there. 135 isn't that far away.
Yeah. Somebody will score 140. That record's there to be broken. That was a thrilling part of our being the first one to score over 130 that year. And a large part of it was we went to Europe that summer before, and I don't think our players ever realized they could put those kind of numbers up until we did it in Europe, and then came back, and it was not a big deal to do it when we came back to the United States. But it's hard. Here, all of us are very creative. I'm not sure how you go beyond where we are. There's probably a way. But my brain is too many gray cells gone, I guess, to really think of how it can happen, how you can really take another big leap, in terms of pace of play and disparity of shot attempts.
I'm the same way, Gary. I don't, and I really don't see the point. I mean, it's where it is already, and there are a few other teams buying into it as it is, and getting more extreme, I don't know, is the answer or even the direction you necessarily need or have to go. I just think what it is a unique style that has been successful for some teams, and you know, the trick for me, the next level for me personally, is just continuing to learn how to try to teach it better and adjust to opponents a little bit better. And that's good enough for me.
Yeah, it's no different than any system, I think, just learning to teach it better. Just getting better at how you instruct and how you teach and how you praise and how you criticize and all of that. That's really the key. Yeah. And, you know, I know yes, and that's true that we're no longer, we're an extremist, but there's more, there's a few more of us on that end, and the women's game particularly, a few more, and there's more of those kind of concepts that are coming into the game with analytics than there were when we first started doing it back in the early 2000s. So
yeah, who would have thought the Rockets, you know, NBA team would be taking half their shots from three? 15 years ago, that would be considered an unbalanced offense. And as we said in the book, how can it be unbalanced when you get 50% of your shots are threes and 50% of them are twos? That sounds pretty balanced.
Yeah, it does. It does.
The last one I have for you guys is at the high school level. Been talking to some coaches. Which one do you think is more sustainable in a program? LMU style or the Grinnell system subbing style?
The Grinnell what?
Running Grinnell system subbing, 5 in, 5 out, or running more of an LMU style, playing your 8 or 9 guys and just playing fast?
I don't know. I think I'd have to vote for LMU. Maybe I'm just looking at the realities of high school basketball, playing 8 or 9 kids, which is what LMU did, and having a real simple offensive structure. Basically, I know even LMU did this. They didn't have any complexity in the way that they ran their break. It was you go here, you go here. It was a true numbered break. But Bo Kimball played 2 or 3 different positions. Correct. So he could move guys around to get them to play different roles within that structure. And that was fairly simple to learn how to do, I would think. Now, Gary, you've actually run both, so maybe you'd be the one to address that question more intelligently.
Well, I think it fits more high school because just what you were saying earlier, you know, you're not likely to go as deep with 12 to 15 players as in most high schools as you can. That's a saw any place, but by and large, that's one reason why the LMU would be probably more easily accepted, more consumable. I think it's more consumable by your public and by the players. Not that it's better. I mean, I think the system is and can be very successful at the high school level too, but by and large, the LMU would probably be a little bit easier sell and maybe more appropriate.
Yeah, there have been a lot of high school coaches that have blown up trying to run the system. And I think most of the time it's because they just didn't have the personnel or the depth, or their kids had too many parents. You know, it's just funny how that works. They go home at night. They don't go back to their dorm room. They're going home to their home, and they're having to defend to their parents, and they're just a whole different political dynamic in high school.
Yeah, that's a big factor of it. I know just from my experience with it, trying to do it, that a significant part of it was just not a total buy-in, and whether that total buy-in by the coach was because of player and parental discrepancies and feelings and so forth. Yeah. But you know, if you're not all in, you're pretty much no place. And I think that'd be the other reason that,
I have a really good podcast coming up. You guys probably know the man, Coach Evan Massey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's coming on one of the next ones, so it's going to be a unique one because he ran the system, and then he got away from it. So we'll get to hear the ins and outs of why he went to it and why he got voted off the island.
Well, you know, another guy that you might talk to in those regards, the coach, Ron Roan.
Yeah.
It was on with our discussions fairly early on.
From Muhlenberg?
He's in Pennsylvania at Susquehanna, is it, Doug?
Muhlenberg College.
Muhlenberg. I'm sorry.
I should probably give Mike to George too.
Yeah, Muhlenberg, and you know, he would be a good one to talk to because he did it very successfully, and he's not done it, but he'll tell you he learned a lot from it and incorporated a lot of things, I think, in what he does now from what he learned when he did run the system.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys personally. You've been great to me. You're great for basketball in general. And whether you're a system coach or not a system coach, this book is just gold. And I don't know how much time you guys did it. Doug will say it's 320 pages too long. That's his joke. That's a little bit less. I'm giving him 80. He really thinks it should only have been 3 pages, but I just want to thank you guys. You're great for basketball in general. Coach Smith, for a guy that's retired, you come to the clinics, you come listen to people, you're always wanting to learn. Coach Porter's always willing to help people learn the system and basketball in general. So I want to thank both of you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for doing all you've done for our game. All you've done with the Zoom and the podcast and everything here have been great for our game, great for system basketball. So thank you. It's something I obviously I love the game and a lot of different ways to play it. And this has been fun. I enjoy sharing.
All right, guys. You guys have a great night and we'll see you soon.
Take care. See you, Doug.